Hi there, Release Fire here. So I'm going to talk you through how to fly in Starfield. It's fairly complicated. There's a lot to take into account. So I've put timestamps into the description for you to be able to see what bit you might be interested in. I'll be covering space travel, fast travel, mission travel, and space combat. And then finally, a little note on how to dock to stations and other ships in space. As ever, hopefully the video helps you out. If it does, drop me a like below. But to start with, I'm going to cover things for the controller. The controller is sort of the easiest way to fly, but I'll also be covering keyboard and mouse a little bit later on. So again, check the description for the timestamps for that if you want to move ahead. However, some of the things in this section might be useful nonetheless. So in here, you're going to move around using the right analog stick. You kind of do that by moving left and right and up and down, and that is your primary way that you move. If you move the left analog stick left and right, then the ship just starts to barrel roll left and right and doesn't actually go anywhere. So definitely use the right analog controller and then use the left analog controller with up and down to be able to control how fast you go. Like I said earlier, it's a little bit complicated, but when you get used to it, it starts to make sense. It's a bit more technical than your average flying kind of simulator, but it does get easier the more you do it. Now, in addition to going top speed by pushing the left analog stick up, you'll also then get a boost by pressing down on the left analog stick, and your speed will be determined by how much power you've put into the engine. So you can see by increasing the amount of power to the engine, my maximum speed goes up, and a part of the game is managing that on the fly. And to do that on a controller, you use the directional pad to go left and right to choose the different parameter to increase, and then you press up and down to increase or decrease the amount of power you put into it. You've only got so much power to start with, so you need to manage this as you go. You can also combine the right analog stick pushing to the right or left with the barrel roll to get even more momentum, going in a right and downward momentum and a left and downward momentum if you want to. It kind of works out in fight if you're really looking for maneuverability. It's also worth bearing in mind that the faster you go, the harder you'll find it to turn. So if you really want to get a sharp corner, then you need to slow down before you actually do it. And then you've got 3 attack options. You've got the laser, which is great for bringing down the shield using the right trigger. And then you've got the ballistic cannon, which is using the left trigger, and that's great to hit up some damage once you've brought down the shield. And it's a similar case with Y to use the missiles, which will again do a hell of a lot of damage. You can check the controls for all of these by going into settings and bindings, and it's a similar story to change your settings for your controls. So again, you just go to settings and controls, and then you can do things like inverting the flight Y, and that's where you can kind of make some changes to customize it for yourself. It's a similar story if you're playing on mouse and keyboard, and here's where I'll start to talk through the controls here and the differences that you have in the game. So skip ahead if you want to using the timestamps, but for everybody else, you fire your boosters with shift, you switch flight modes with space, use the mouse 1, 2 and G to fire the weapons, your ship action is R, you can select a target with E, up, down, left and right is how you control your system power, and then you repair with D. And when you're in the game itself, when you're actually flying, use the mouse to go left, right and up and down. And it's a similar story if you're using the tracker pad to go up, down, left and right, and then you use A and D to be able to do the barrel roll left and right, and W and S if you want to increase or decrease your speed. Now you can also see the bindings that you have for most of the weapons on the wheel on the screen, which is something that will always be there, so that's probably going to be helpful if you forget any of that, but that should cover all of the bases when it comes to PC controls for Starfield and how to fly. It's worth bearing in mind that you don't actually need to fly everywhere to get around. You actually need to use the fast travel system, and you can do that by accessing the missions. If you ever want to go on a mission, just go into missions, choose the mission, and then choose show on the map or set as your route, and then you'll be able to choose that location to be able to fast travel to it, which you can see on the screen now. You always get like a little prompt of what you need to press. In this case, I need to press and hold X to be able to jump to that system, and then the grav jump will kick in as long as you have at least one power bar in the GRV part of the system. So make sure you put that in before you try to grav jump, and then if you put more power in, you'll be able to grav jump even quicker. And then once you get to your location, once you get to your planet, you then need to go back into the star map and select to land, although you can press A or the action button to be able to activate it as well to be able to land. But this is the method using the star map that I mentioned a little bit earlier. I can press B to zoom out of here, and you can keep zooming to go out into the system menu, and you can see all the systems that you can go to there. And then you just need to press the hold to land, and that's pretty much it. Once you've landed, you can then either exit the ship, get up in the cockpit, or take off again. And I'm taking off again because there's plenty more to show you. So again, going into the star map and then backing up using B to get into the system view, you can then hop between planets. So there's no need for you to fly between one planet and another, which would take forever. You can just fast travel to planets within a system, as well as fast traveling between solar systems. With that covered, it's time to start talking about space combat, and you definitely want to upgrade your ship, in particular if you take on any fleets. Now, to do that, you just need to talk to a ship service technician, which you can find next to a docking port like this one in Jemison, and then you just need to go onto I'd like to modify my ship. You can also buy ships if you want to and repair your ship here, but it is kind of pricey. For me, you definitely want to get your shields upgraded and modded as early as possible, and then possibly your lasers, then followed by ballistics and missiles, in particular for the dogfights, which you get into really, really quickly, especially if you want to crunch through the missions that you get in Jemison from the Constellation board. Now, the menu system in here for the modding of the ship is a little bit complicated, but essentially you need to choose one of the different components and select it, and then once you're happy with all of your changes, you need to back out of here and then click A to accept, and it'll tell you how much it's going to cost you before you click accept. So make sure you check that so that you're not just destroying all your funds. And then it's a good idea to go to a different location to where the dogfights are or the ships are to be able to set up your system. You can see I like to go with as much shield as possible and then a high amount of ideally missile, but I'd made some changes to my ship. But if you haven't got missile, then ballistics on as max as possible, and then lasers on about 5, and they can be used to melt down the shield as much as possible before you then use your missiles and ballistics to bring down the health of the ship. Now, this is a fleet, so it's quite a tricky mission to do. So some of the things that I use is to use boosts to make sure I'm always behind the other ships. I'm always trying to stay out of the way and round the other ships. Ideally, if you can get in behind them, that's where you've got the best chance of doing as much damage. You can see here I'm coming straight on, but luckily I was close enough to them again because I was boosting to get into a good position. So always use your boost when you've got a chance, and then again get back onto the shield melting lasers and then hit them up with either ballistics and missiles to be able to crunch them out of the skies. There was 4 of them in this mission. It was pretty tricky, and it was all about just staying behind them. I'd gone against them a number of times before this and kind of got destroyed quite a lot. It's only in this one where I managed to stay out of their way a little bit using boost that I was able to defeat them. The other thing that came in handy is making sure my ship was fully repaired before I actually started the fight. So again, check your health in the bottom right hand corner. If it's looking low and you've got 4 or 5 ships to face, then you're probably going to get destroyed. So repair it before the fight, make sure you move around a lot and use your boost, and follow the strategy of using the lasers and ballistics and missiles to be able to finish them off in a similar way to me. And hopefully with that setup, or maybe even with a better setup, you should be able to replicate the process and defeat fleets relatively easily. Although in all fairness, this one really was a tough dogfight and took a hell of a lot of time for me to get the strategy right. So again, hopefully it kind of saves you a bit of time in your own playthrough. Now don't forget to pick up the loot that's in the debris for the ships that you've downed. And it's also worth bearing in mind that you can incapacitate ships and board them. And that leads on to the final point about docking with other ships and satellite stations. So you need to press A or R if you're playing on the keyboard to be able to activate the option to be able to dock with the station or with the ship, and then you'll get this scene, and that is how to dock. And that should give you everything you need to know about how to fly in Starfield. As ever, if the video helps you out, drop a like below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already with the link on the left hand side. You can also see the rest of my guide videos for Starfield with the links on the right hand side. Leave any comments if you're still not sure about anything, and I'll catch you next time.